Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have it. Finally, the answer to the question that's been on all of our minds for the past 3 months, which is this. How is it that Friedrich Nietzsche could love the god Dionysus, the god of wine and intoxication, and yet hate alcohol? I know that's what you've been thinking about, and the answer has been given to us by this phenomenal author, Brian Muraresku. At least that's what it looks like he's done for us so generously in this fantastic work. Now, I'm being a little lighthearted, obviously. The book is not about Nietzsche. I'm not sure it mentions Nietzsche. And I know this because I looked through the index of it. No, I haven't read it yet. So why would I be talking about a book I haven't read yet, even as I hold it in my hand? And it is to address a subject that I don't need to have read the book to address, and that is to the hallucinogenic spiritual crowd. And I feel like I can speak to this a little bit, having listened to Mr. Muraresku's excellent interview on the Joe Rogan podcast, which every heterosexual man should listen to. And maybe the homosexual ones as well. The man is an interesting scholar for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's very hard to get a scholar in the field of studying psychedelics who isn't a personal user. This makes Mr. Muraresku sort of stick out from the crowd a little bit, unlike, for example, Joe Rogan, let alone a Sam Harris, for example. And it is an interesting book because it's clearly from an archaeological and linguistic perspective. And the reason I want to talk is because it's important to understand, even as you are reading a book like The Immortality Key, that linguistics and archaeology are not the only frame to understand the subject matter from. You can look at, for example, the history of the Eleusinian, however that's enunciated, mysteries from a linguistic perspective. You can look at it from an archaeological perspective. And you can also look at it from a spiritual perspective. What is the spirit? What is the character that is advocated for, that this practice, that this worldview results in? What does this aesthetic generate? And I want to make that distinction because from a few pages into the book, it becomes very clear. Something becomes very clear that was not as obvious in Brian Muraresku's interview with Joe Rogan. This book, the axe that is being ground in this book is not, drugs are good. Much to the contrary, in fact. Not that drugs are bad, obviously, but that drugs are very, very powerful and very, the people who use drugs in a religious context in the societies that Mr. Muraresku is describing seemed to hold the recreational misuse of these drugs not just as unhealthy, but actually as religious blasphemy. So, if you are a recreational LSD user who think that it's just great at raves and everything, this is not your defensive barrier. This is not your wall of, see, look, it's legit, guys. That's not how this works. No, rather, the axe that Mr. Muraresku seems to be grinding here is and this may come as a surprise to some and as no surprise whatsoever to others, anti-Christianity. Now again, this is a brief look at the first few pages here. But what those first few pages demonstrate is not just a Christian destruction of the past, but also, of course, the modern Christian moralization against the exploration of these things, mostly with an emphasis on the Christian destruction of the past. The author is clearly fascinated by and enjoys learning about these ancient religions, Christianity included, by the way. And so as an archaeologist, it's kind of unforgivable to look back and say this cult, the early Christians, under Emperor Theodosius, said this place is to be shut down and we're also going to destroy it and we're going to desecrate it while we do it, which the Christians did. This may come as a surprise to many Christians who think that their religious past was all meek and mild from the beginning. And to readers of my book, Holy Nihilism, which argues that Christianity, in its final terminus point, spiritually culminates to a place of pacifism, this history may seem a little contradictory as well. I believe that there is a perfectly rational way to see both of those things as not mutually exclusive at all. In fact, perfectly compatible. And I address some of the Christian iconoclasm in the early parts of the faith, especially in detail. But that's a subject for another time. I just want to emphasize the importance of understanding what frame you're looking at these things through, because it can be very easy to see from the perspective of a writer like Muraresku, who is a scholar and by all appearances a very good one too, and I do recommend the book. He is looking at it from the frame of archaeology and from linguistics. And so it can be very easy to take his, asserted opposition between, for instance, Christianity and the Eleusinian mysteries as a fact, which it might be from a sort of political perspective. These were obviously adversarial forces. Now, I hear that he is going to get into some interesting facts about possible additives to the Eucharist back in the day, which I'm sure he'll have good evidence for. We will see. But from another scholar of equal, if not greater repute, and I refer to the man whose work I have been obsessed with for the last year, and that's Gregory, Nagy, the ancient Greek hero in 24 Hours, specifically, who provides a completely different frame for understanding how these religions might compare with each other. Now, there are a lot of religions around the world, and they don't all agree about what is valuable or what should be valued. And so when you see two religions presented as juxtaposed, as opposites and as adversarial because of disagreements in details about which God is real versus which God is not real, but both become strongly convinced that death is not the end, that life continues after death, that it is important to have empathy and compassion and to get along with others, which not all religions advocate, by the way, and are in so many other ways so similar I think it's important to bear other frames of comparison in mind, even as you're reading something that seems so definitive and strong as Muraresku has been made out to be. Now, again, perhaps I'm speaking prematurely on this, but the point will remain no matter what is actually in Muraresku's book, because a very strong case can be made that the Iliad, and I'm not sure if anyone's made this case before. I know Lindybeige almost started to make it in his excellent introductory video to what the Iliad is really about, and I'll add a link in the description to that because it's so good for those of you who haven't read the Iliad. But I believe it is arguable that you can find the origins of Christian spirituality in the Iliad. They're there, and if you understand none of the language complexities, none of the symbolic iconography and the significance of tombs or anything like that, that will still be apparent. And then the deeper you dive into the language and some of the symbolism used, it becomes even more obvious, in my humble opinion. And then you get to the Odyssey and things diverge wildly again. So I just want to throw it out there, and this might be of interest to Christians, why many Christians seem to lean more towards the Iliad than the Odyssey. If I were a Christian, I might even be inclined to say something as radical as the Iliad is a better spiritual foundation for the New Testament than the Old Testament is. The Old Testament, whose God was an angry and absolute God who didn't seem to provide much in the way of life after death. Now, there are arguments that there are some elements of New Testament spirituality, we could say, in the some of the books of wisdom, perhaps. But there's a clear difference in spirituality between the Old Testament and the New Testament. There's a clear continuity of narrative between the Old and the New that wouldn't exist in the between the Iliad and the New Testament. But again, that's just one frame. Archaeology is one frame. Linguistics is a frame. Apparently, archaeochemistry is a frame that I didn't know about before. And the spirit itself, the character that you develop and become one with and create a relationship with, can maybe even speak with. That is another dimension and a layer to keep in mind when reading these things. So, do buy this book. It looks excellent. The author is a very smart guy. The first few pages are remarkable. My stronger recommendation would, as always, be to Gregory Nagy's book. And, of course, why not to my own. I am no fan of Christianity, of course. I've debated with pastors and priests and theologians on the subject. You can find a quite enjoyable debate, I think, over at on the Godcast. I have to recheck the episode number. I'll probably add that as a link in the description as well. But if you are a Christian, there's a lot to be learned, I think, about your own religion from studying the Iliad. Not so much the Odyssey, but the Iliad for certain. And there's and remember that the one frame that is currently in your attention, in focus, whether that's science or whether that is linguistics or whether that is even narrative history, is not the only frame to understand these things from. And there's always a whole new world to dive into it in exploring these subjects. of such great depth and history, and with so much scholarship written about it. So that's mostly what I wanted to say.